I had a day when I had this realization, this is why you healed. I love sharing what I've learned. I love helping other people. But the reason that I healed, the reason that I focused so hard and worked so diligently for so long was for my family. I wanted to be alive for these events for my family. I wanted to be there and be whole and be present for my daughter's wedding and my son's, senior year of high school and his graduation. Hey, welcome to the Upside of Bipolar. I am your host, Michelle Reidinger, and it has been a minute. For those of you who are regular listeners, you have noticed that I have been on hiatus for the past several months, and I'm really excited to be back and especially excited to share with you why I put a pause on my podcast. So, in order to talk about the last few months, it's important to talk about what's been going on over the last year. A little over a year ago, our family moved. My husband had been out of work for a little while and was looking for employment, and it necessitated a move for our family. And I actually did a podcast episode after that move because I was excited. It was the first time I had moved without getting manic and without getting depressed afterwards. And so it was a really incredible learning experience. But we were in kind of a temporary living situation for a little while. And things were we were starting to get settled in and starting to get into a rhythm with things. And then in December, we got a big surprise when our oldest daughter got engaged. And it was exciting, a little bit surprising, not surprising in a bad way. We love our now son-in-law, her fiance at the time, but we didn't realize how serious they were. They were young adults and weren't spending a lot of time with us. And so we didn't see them very often and didn't realize how serious things had gotten. And so we were a little caught off guard when they got engaged, but really excited at the same time. And then in January, my husband up to that point had been working some consulting jobs, but in January, he got a new job and it necessitated a move for him. I couldn't go at the time. He needed to move to the town it's a different part of our state where he was going to be working because it was too far for him to be driving back and forth every day. He tried it for a little bit. And after about a week, he was like, yeah, I can't do this. And so we moved him into an apartment close to where he was going to be working. And that made things really challenging right away because I was now a single parent, making sure I was holding down the fort, taking care of our family and all of the things that entailed, plus trying to do my podcast and my blog and all the social media that was associated with that, and the Upsiders Tribe, which was of all of my work things, that's the highest priority. And I started to get a little bit overwhelmed. I was planning my daughter's wedding, and I understand now why people hire wedding planners. I will not make that mistake again. But I was trying to manage all of the preparations for the wedding. I have a son who just graduated from high school. And so he was in his senior year, having his, senior year, he was, captain the volleyball team and had a lot of things going on with volleyball. And I didn't want to miss any of those things because it was our last time through that stuff. And we wanted to make sure we were there for him. And planning the wedding and trying to manage all the day-to-day things that were going on. And I just started realizing if I keep up at this pace, this experience is going to be wasted. And I had a day when I had this realization, this is why you healed. I love sharing what I've learned. I love helping other people. But the reason that I healed, the reason that I focused so hard and worked so diligently for so long was for my family. I wanted to be alive for these events for my family. I wanted to be there and be whole and be present for my daughter's wedding and my son's, senior year of high school and his graduation. And at the pace that I was going and all the things that I was trying to manage at the same time, it was making things super stressful. I could tell I was starting to get irritated really easily. And I didn't want that to be the experience that I had with my daughter. She's only going to get married once. And I didn't want the experience I had with her preparing and planning and hosting her wedding to be a negative one. And so I made a very conscious decision. I talked it over with my husband and I put everything on pause except for the Upsiders Tribe, my coaching group. Those they don't ever get a pause. I'm committed 100% to helping them. And so I made sure that we were still having our monthly success sessions with each individual person, and then our group coaching sessions each week on Wednesday nights. And they were getting what they needed from me. But everything else, the podcast, the blog, social media, everything else went on pause because I wanted to make sure that I was fully present and able to function in a healthy way for my family. And it was incredible. I had some really beautiful experiences with my daughter, and it was actually a very healing process for us as well. My daughter and I over the years have been working through the healing process because when she was young, she was about 4 when I was hospitalized all those times. Not about 4, she was 4 when I was hospitalized a number of times and made multiple attempts on my life. And so she was aware, as I went through the healing process, she was aware of things, and it did a lot of harm to our relationship. And over the past 5 years, we've been doing a lot of work together with individual therapy and with therapy together a few times. And I've been making conscientious effort to try and heal that relationship and be present for my daughter. And so the experience of planning her wedding was incredible. It was so beautiful. It was such a sweet experience for both of us. And I've heard a lot of horror stories. I was actually quite nervous about planning her wedding because in the past we've had some challenging dynamics sometimes between the two of us. And I thought I've heard all these, people talk about how stressful weddings are and how stressful the planning experience is. And it wasn't like that because I made the conscious choice to step back from other stressors so that I could focus and be there for my daughter. And we had some really amazing experiences. Wedding dress shopping was such a sweet experience. It was just beautiful. And one of my favorite experiences throughout this thing was, throughout this whole process, was when she had her bridals taken. I don't know if everybody knows about bridals. I didn't know about it until a few years ago because that wasn't a thing when I was getting married. But bridals you usually do them about a month or a month and a half before you get married. And the bride does the first look with the groom and they do pictures. We went to a beautiful garden, public garden that was doing a tulip festival at the time. And so we got to be there with the photographer while they took pictures of my daughter and her, at that time, fiance. And it was just amazing. And during that time, I actually had several thoughts about how grateful I was to be alive and how grateful I was for all the work and effort that I put into healing because I was able to be there fully present for my daughter, healthy, whole, with a healthy relationship with her. And it just filled me with gratitude. And I kept thinking this is why I did it all. This is why I wanted to heal, was for these kinds of moments, these experiences with her and with my other family. And then the wedding itself was amazing. We had lots of support from family and friends and spent a lot of time decorating. I have a sister-in-law who is so incredibly talented with kind of interior decorating. She's not professional. She just has a knack for it and loves it. And she worked so hard. I was there to support her, but she did a lot of work putting together, pieces for the reception center that we held it at. And we did a lot of work. We had I think 14 hours of decorating the day before. I just wanted to look beautiful for my daughter. And we had some incredible support as we went through the wedding day. And it's funny because I was really working hard to practice mindfulness while I was going through this whole experience. One of the things that mindfulness taught me was how important it is to stay present. When I was going through the healing process, one of the things I learned about myself was that I had intentionally, and I've talked about this before, but I had intentionally taught myself to daydream because I was so uncomfortable in my own head. And I also realized I was really incredibly uncomfortable with silence in the past because my brain was never silent. And so silence around me made me uncomfortable because it left me with only the intrusive thoughts that were in my head. And so I, over the years, had learned, developed these coping mechanisms of listening to podcasts, listening to music, I always had to have something playing. When a lot of times I would binge watch shows, so that I was focused on something else. But I had been incredibly uncomfortable in my own head. And one of the beautiful things about the healing process was that especially when I learned how to practice mindfulness meditation, was that I learned how to be not only comfortable, but embrace silence and embrace just being present in the moment. And so I intentionally practiced mindfulness throughout this entire process, especially on my daughter's wedding day. And I didn't take a single picture the whole day because I just wanted so much to be able to experience that entire day fully and be fully present for all of it. And it was, words fail me. It was absolutely perfect. It was a perfect day. It could not have been better. So beautiful to watch my sweet daughter and son-in-law get married, and the joy that they felt, and all of the joy of all of our family. My husband and I, we felt so in love with each other that day, and we had so much fun. You know, my daughter's in-laws hosted a wedding luncheon, and in their backyard, it was very beautiful. They had worked really hard on their yard to make sure it was ready for guests, and they had tables set up, and we just got to enjoy being with each other and sharing, why we loved our children. And then at the reception, we had so much fun. My daughter loves to dance. She does country swing dancing all the time, she and her fiance. And so we had really fun music and just danced the night away and had such a fun night. And I was filled with gratitude that night for everybody, and not just at for the wedding reception and the wedding day itself. I was incredibly filled with gratitude for all the people that had put so much effort into helping it to be a beautiful day for my daughter and for our family, but also for all the people that have supported me and our family along this healing path. I kept thinking about my mom and dad, and about my mother and father-in-law, about friends and family that have been so supportive of us as we've gone through all of the challenges we've experienced and through the healing process. And all of it culminated on that day. It was just amazing. And then about a month after, not even a month, sorry, it was actually 3 weeks. I was trying to remember because it was a really quick turnover. About 3 weeks after our daughter got married, our son graduated from high school. And so we had all these last final things going on for him. And then less than a month after that, we moved. And so we've had all of these things happening over the past about 8 months, 9 months, that have been major life-changing experiences, major shifts for our family. And one of the things that I was, as I was preparing for this episode, that I realized was how automatic the Mood Cycle Survival Guide tools are for me now. I don't even think about them as the Mood Cycle Survival Guide. They're just part of the way that I manage my life. At the beginning of the year, when I started finding myself getting overwhelmed with my husband, starting a new job in another city and moving away, and my son having all of these things happening for his senior year with volleyball and senior activities, and my daughter, especially my daughter, getting married. And we had a few things happening with our youngest daughter that we needed to work on, so there are just a lot of stressors going on. And instead of like introverting and not being able to handle things, my brain automatically went to those resources in the Mood Cycle Survival Guide. The first one is, who is your team? I'm very good now at turning to the people that are support, people for help. I have very good relationships, for example, with my I call her my Wendy. I actually interviewed her on my podcast, I think like a year and a half ago. But she does all of my like marketing, managing, and that. She and I work together very closely. And so I talked to her about, what I needed from her and what my bandwidth was for work. I was able to talk with, I have close family members that we support each other, and letting them know, I kind of have a low bandwidth right now, and these are the priorities. And so these things are going to have to take a back seat. And so it was that team, even when you go through the healing process, I think just in life in general, everybody needs support people. You provide support for others and others provide support for you. And when you establish healthy boundaries around that support, it helps us to support each other and to be there for each other, because we can't function entirely on our own. It really is difficult. And so I was able to automatically think of who are my support people and what do I need from them, and how do I ask in a healthy way. And then, of course, the step 2 of the mood cycle survival guide is, what are my red flags and triggers? What are the things that make things difficult for me to stay in a healthy, balanced mindset? And it's not because I have quote unquote bipolar disorder anymore. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But it's because there are triggers and stressors for every person. Every person that lives on this earth has things that cause stress for them, that trigger anxiety, that trigger undesirable emotional responses. And so being aware of those, number one of them for me is just getting overwhelmed. If you have too many things going on, I started to get snappy with people and really impatient because I was feeling overwhelmed. I had so many things going on. And that is a normal emotional response. And it was just a red flag that you've got too many things happening and you need to take a step back and evaluate, which is, again, step 3 of the mood cycle survival guide. Or what are your power priorities? What are the things that matter most? And what things can I let go? And during this time, I did not want to sacrifice the experience of planning my daughter's wedding and experience, all of those once in a lifetime opportunities and experiences with my daughter. I didn't want to sacrifice those because I was trying to do too many things in my life. And so the power priorities for me, and that changes. One of the things I've talked about in earlier episodes when I've talked about the mood cycle survival guide is how your power priorities will change over time. And so it's important to kind of evaluate those on a periodic basis and see where you are. And for me, the priorities were, I needed to make sure that my children were getting what they needed. I had a son who was, a senior in high school and, going through his last volleyball games of his high school career, and I didn't want to miss those. And my youngest daughter had some things happening in her, little world that needed some attention, and I needed to be able to be present for her. And of course, I had the planning that was going on, and I had never planned a wedding before. I don't remember my husband and I, we almost eloped. Like, there was very little planning that went into our marriage. It was just a little tiny, ceremony, and our family did a wedding luncheon for us, but there was no big wedding. And so I had never gone through this process of planning a wedding before. And so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And as I started to feel the weight of all of the things that had to be done and starting to recognize how much work was actually going to go into this, that was when I started to step back and say, I'm doing too many things right now and something has to give. And so that's when I evaluated and identified what my priorities were, what were my power priorities, and what things do I need to let go of right now so that I can give my best to those priorities. And it was absolutely amazing, the whole experience. And I know that I'm using amazing and incredible. I wish that I had better vocabulary right now to describe the experiences that we went through. But because I had done all this healing, number one, I was able to be fully present for my daughter, and it was a healing experience for us. It was a beautiful memory, all of its beautiful memories. So we don't have any negative memories from this whole experience. We didn't have fights. There were no meltdowns. There were times when we had disagreements about things, but we were able to handle them in a healthy way. But there were no big blowups or damage to the relationship because number one, we had done a lot of work on healing our relationship. And number two, I had done a lot of work on learning how to identify when I was starting to get snappy or cranky or having emotional responses that were undesirable. I was able to check myself and recognize, like, there's something going on underneath this. What do I need to change in order to get back to where I can have healthy emotional responses to things? And I think I was in the middle of a thought that required a second thing, but I apologize because that took me off on a tangent and I don't remember what I was saying. Anyway, but the other thing that has been incredible is our move. So there was a lot of stress leading up to the move because we had the wedding and then we had my son's, graduating, and we had, finding a place to live can be a very stressful experience. And thankfully we had some help with that. And we were able to find a really great place for our family to move. And I set some pretty aggressive goals for myself with our move this time because I had already been through a move once where I didn't trigger, any hypomania or depression afterwards. And so I got much more aggressive about how I wanted to handle this move because I think I realized like I've healed. I'm not going to trigger any kind of mood swings with this move. But I also recognized, so one of the things that I learned about when we get curious about why we experience symptoms, it can lead us to some really great insight into ourselves. So one of the things that I learned about myself with moves is that when I move, it is a lot of change and a lot of stress all at one time. And in the past, I would hide from that stress in coping mechanisms. And one of the things that my therapist said to me a long time ago is, what is the need you are trying to fill with this coping mechanism? And my main coping mechanism that I struggled with for a long time was binge watching television. And I didn't like it. And I don't want this to anybody to feel like if you binge watch something for a weekend because you need a break, this is not an indictment of that. This was me becoming totally dysfunctional for several weeks, sometimes a month after a move, not taking care of myself, not taking care of my family. That is the kind of binge watching I'm talking about. It is highly unhealthy. But that was the way that my brain was trying to cope with the overwhelming stress that it felt with the move. And when we moved to, the last year, I tried to figure out, kind of played with, my brain needs something. It's feeling overwhelmed and stressed right now. What can I do to give it something to help with that stress that does not involve binge watching? Because I did not want to do that again. But I needed to give my brain something to help because it needed help. Moving is a very stressful experience for most people. I'm super impressed by people that are in the military that have figured out a way to move, regularly without getting overwhelmed. That's highly impressive to me. But this move, I was like wanting to see if I could do a better job this time, if I could improve even more. And so I set a really aggressive goal for myself with unpacking. The packing part was stressful. I don't like moving. It's not my favorite thing to do. But we were able to get all the packing done and the move, done in one day, which was our goal. Meaning like everything from one location to the other. And then I wanted to try and unpack in 2 weeks, like completely unpack my house, get all the boxes unpacked, put away, things put on the wall, everything done in 2 weeks. And I discovered that for me, if I listen to audiobooks, that serves the same purpose, and I'm actually able to be productive at the same time. And so I did. My son-in-law turned me on to a really fun series, a trilogy called the Mistborn series. And it was shocking to me when I figured out how many hours of this book I had listened to. I think it was like 55 or 60 hours of this book. But I would get up in the morning, go on a walk, and then we would take care of my family, and it was summertime, thankfully. So I had 1 week, I had a niece come stay with us and play with my daughter. And then about a week and a half later, I had my nephew come. So I just found a friend for my daughter and let them play. And then I went to work on the house, and it was a really fulfilling experience because I was able to stay focused and productive and still give my brain what it needed to function. To kind of escape a little bit because the move was stressful. It's a stressful experience. But I was able to provide my brain what it needed so that it could manage the stress and still be productive. And so each day I was able to sit in a room that I had unpacked or, look at something that I had accomplished that day and acknowledge, yes, this is stressful and I'm not super big fan of moving, but I'm managing it and it's working. And so after 2 weeks, everything was unpacked and I was able to, have a positive summer, the rest of the summer with my daughter. And now we are homeschooling. I didn't think I was ever going to homeschool again. I homeschooled my older two children until each of them were in 8th grade. And when my youngest came along, she's 8 years younger than my son. And by the time she came along, I was totally burnt out. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that again. But she asked last year multiple times if we could do homeschooling. And at first I thought, I have no interest in doing that. But as I thought about it more, especially through all of the, we were packing and getting ready to move, and I started thinking about it, I thought maybe we could do that. And so I did a little investigation and found a really great online school that she loves. And so we're homeschooling now. So I think maybe this might be it for today's episode. I didn't realize that I was going to talk for this long, but I don't want it to be too long. But the next episode, I'm actually going to do another solo episode because I want to talk about something that I learned through this experience. I'll give you a little preview. I did write a blog post about this. It's called Don't Call It Bipolar Disorder in scare quotes. And it's something that has been on my mind a lot during this past 8 months, because by labeling bipolar a disorder, we do a huge disservice for the people struggling with these symptoms. And I don't want to get into this too much right now because I think this deserves its own episode, but that's what we're going to talk about next time. So I hope that this update has been helpful. Sorry that I don't have a broader vocabulary. I feel that the words that I'm using are highly inadequate to express the gratitude and joy that I've felt over this past 8 months, and stress, and some overwhelm. But mostly joy. We've had some really beautiful experiences. Even after they got married, we've had fun. When we moved in, for 4th of July, my son-in-law and daughter came and stayed with us. So we had all of our family together for 4th of July for a few days, and it was just so happy. It's so much fun to see your children moving forward in their life. We have a really fantastic son-in-law. We love him so much, and he's such a great addition to our family. I know that they are their own family, but he is part of our family now as well. And so we're so happy to have him as part of our family. And maybe I'll ask and see if they'll agree to let me share a few of the wedding pictures. I might see if they'll let me do that, because that would be really fun to share that with everybody. But if anybody has read my book, The Upside of Bipolar: 7 Steps to Heal Your Disorder, this that I'm sharing right now is the rest of the story. In the book, I talk about how my daughter she saved my life. My desire to be a good mom for my daughter and both of my daughters and my sons, that's what saved my life. That is what finally helped me to recognize that I could not make any more attempts on my life, and I had to help myself. I had to figure out a way to survive. I had to figure out not a way just to survive, but to thrive, to heal. I didn't know that I was healing when I was going through the healing process. I was just trying to be a better mom. That was what motivated me in the first place. And I am forever grateful that I made that choice. And I hope if you are struggling, if you're listening to this and you're struggling and feeling hopeless, that you will take a look at my other podcast episodes, read my blog. I would highly encourage you to read my book. I wrote the book because there was too much information that I had learned to share in one sitting. A lot of times people would come to me and ask for help, and I would try to teach them everything I knew. And it was a little bit like drinking through a fire hose. It was too much information. This is information, and studies and everything that I've gained over 15 years, and trying to share that in one sitting with somebody was very overwhelming to them. And so that's why I wrote the book. I wrote my book to teach people what I've learned so that you can find your own path to healing. So I will record another episode, and we'll put another episode up next week. I'm really excited to share what I've learned and some of the new insights that I've gained that will hopefully help each of you on your own path to healing. Until next time, Outsiders.